Bitcoin continues its rejection from 83K, which was a bearish area of interest, and now we're coming into a bullish area of interest. But is Bitcoin going to be able to hold as DXY potentially pops up and ES corrects? Let's dive in and talk about it. All right, starting here with Bitcoin on the daily, I just want to look at the naked chart here and analyze what we're really looking at. When it comes to pattern trading and Elliott Wave, when we look at a chart, we're looking at price action here and we're gathering clues from that price action. And hopefully we're not putting our bias on the price action, but we're looking for a directional bias when we look at the price action. I think a few things stick out to me. One thing that's sticking out to me is that this move isn't very swift. We're hesitantly moving to the upside, and that we're moving to the upside on declining volume. In boomer technical analysis, that is basically saying that we're dealing with a bear flag here. Again, also at the larger degree, we have the swift moves down, and we have some kind of corrective nonsense in the move up, held within a channel line here. Typically, when these things play out in the fashion that they are right now, we end up moving down, breaking this low at various degrees and in various prices. So we have to consider that's going to be a possibility here. There are ways in Elliott Wave and in price action trading that we can dig our way out of this, but just with the naked chart, I think we have to come to the conclusion that this is not looking like the most bullish chart that we've seen. Now, when it comes to the Elliott Wave price action, we're always looking for different patterns that can kind of play out and how those patterns play out typically, so we can fit off them and find the direction that we're looking for that the market could potentially go. Looking at this chart, what's the most likely pattern that pops out to you? And that's the question you have to ask yourself every time you look at one of these charts is, what does this chart look like? Does it look like an impulsive move? Does it look like a motive move? Does it look like a flat or a triangle or whatnot? I think most can agree here that based off of price action that's printed here, we're dealing with a bearish correction of some sort in the form of a zigzag move. I think that's the pattern that sticks out most likely, so that should be considered here. Now, is that automatically bearish and mean we're going to move down? Typically, that's what that means, is that we're going to come down and break the origin of the correction here, and then continuation of the trend, that being over here and that being down at the moment, because that's the last move that was swift. So we have swift move down here and a corrective move up here. Typically, we're going to move down again in a swift move, breaking this corrective origin here. In Elliott Wave, we do have patterns that can take a zigzag and make it motive, and we move out of it. And it's just a way of digging ourselves out of something looking corrective, and we end up changing the trend to the upside. But that's not a typical pattern. And I know I've been through this in some of my other videos where everyone thinks diagonals are super prevalent in crypto. And that's probably true because we get junk price action like this, and then all of a sudden we get a pop up and we have to go back and figure out why that happened and justify that happening so we can complete our counting. So again, when we're looking for patterns, we're looking for the most likely outcome so we can get a directional bias and potentially profit off of that. And the most likely potential of a zigzag completing is that eventually we're going to end up breaking this pivot down here at 60K in this situation. So that's what I'm watching for here. It all depends on how we come down. If we end up coming corrective, then that's something to consider, that this is more bullish side. So I think all these things are important to consider when we're looking at price action. You can count things 5 different ways, and 5 different Elliotticians with 5 different levels of experience can come up with a whole bunch of different counts in here. But we have to really look at the larger picture and see which way the direction of the trend is moving, which is down at the moment, and what typically happens after we get price action that looks like this. And in this situation, again, most likely we're going to end up clearing this pivot low down here before we get another chance for a move up. But with all that being considered, let's go ahead and turn on the count here and we'll go through the bullish and the bearish. All right, staying here on the daily for Bitcoin, we're going to look at some of the counts now. Again, I think we still have a 3-wave move up here in Elliott Wave. That can mean that we have a 1-2, 1-2 possibility. This could be a bullish 1 wave in the form of A, B, C1, A, B, C2, and we could keep going up and up in that fashion. But the ideal situation that the bulls want to see is that this is a completed motive wave move up, correction in the wave 2, and then we're putting a 1-2, and then we get a blast off. I think that would be the cleanest way out of here. Again, we don't have to. It's all going to be dependent on this move down here, but I think the swings are there. Again, beyond those two counts of a 1-2-1-2 and this being a larger wave one, we do have some other considerations. We could say this is a 1-2-3-4-5 in the form of an expanding diagonal, which is even rarer in Elliott Wave, but that would have us hold above 65 and 60K. So again, if we do get some kind of corrective move down holding 65, and we end up pushing up past the high at 80, 82 or 83, that would have us look more like an expanding diagonal. The other accounts, again, we're kind of going down the list of possibilities at this point, not really probabilities, is that we have a motive move up here in the form of diagonal, and then we're putting in some kind of flat move here. Again, depending on the flat style, we could hold 65 or we could hold 60. If this is a running flat, we're going to move up before 65. If this is an expanding flat, we're going to move and hold above 60K. But those, I think, would be the more unlikely side of things. I think those are lower on the list of possibilities. And right now, I'm leaning more toward this is 1-2-1-2 possibility for the bullish side. And that would be the most extreme bullish case at this point. On the bearish side, I think we would have this as an A, B, C, and we have a completed zigzag, and we have a lot of clues kind of building and adding on to that case. As last time I went over, we're in parallel channel. We're hitting the 1-to-1 for the A, and we have some other kind of bearish confluence up in this level, that being the level of interest at 80K, and then we're in the algo zone of the last swift swing to the downside, and then we're corrected internally to that motive move down before we get a continuation to the downside. So with all these bearish kind of attributes here, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be moving to the downside and breaking 60K, but I think that's on the list of possibilities, and we have to consider that is a possibility. We need to look closer at this price action here, and we will in a minute, and how this all plays out. But I think the more of these levels that we kind of break, the more sus we have to be that this thing's going to move to the downside and potentially break 65, if not 60K, and move down to the 50s and 40s. I don't think I'm comfortable enough to start saying where we are going to land down here. There's a lot of possibilities, and we can look at those possibilities to see how far our pain threshold could potentially go. But I think I'm going to wait for this area here to see what happens in this area before I start catastrophizing and figuring out what's going to happen down in this area if we end up breaking lower. So over the weekend and for the next week, this is my main area of interest between 71 and 75K. I want to see how we kind of break out of this area. If we're going to break out in the form of breaking through it, breaking this level, or if we're going to come into it, hold it as support, and come back out of it and break above it. So that's bigger picture here on Bitcoin. Let's go ahead and dive into the 1 hour. Before diving into the smaller time frame, I just wanted to look at the price action here again on the naked chart on the daily. And spoiler alert, this on the 1 hour looks questionable. There could be several different ways to count it. And before we put our Elliott Wave all over this stuff, just looking at these swings, I guess we would have to see that this either looks like A, B, C, or a 1-2-1-2-3-4-5. Because of the separation between these corrections here and the overlap of these corrections here, again, I think that's something that we have to consider, and that's going to play a lot into my analysis on what I think this is when we dig deeper down. Again, we have flats, we have running flats, we have all these fun patterns to try and explain the price action in Elliott Wave. But just by looking at these swings, if we're going to go off the swings here, looks like we have a potential for a completed zigzag down, but we break a base channel, or for a 1-2-1-2-3-4-5. We're looking for a potential wave 4 or 5 before we get continuation to the downside. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into the lower time frame. So down here on the 1 hour for Bitcoin, just zoomed in here at our swings. Again, possible 1-2-1-2-3-4-5, and then we're completing down here before we get a bounce up for the wave 4, and then a potential for a wave 5 to complete an impulsive move down. I think that would be the cleanest look here for the bears. A nice impulse down would give us an anchor to build off of, and then we can start looking for that corrective move to this larger impulsive move to the downside, and we can get in on the short. And that's what I'm watching for on the bearish side. But we did end up breaking this pivot of interest here, which gives us some clues as to where we are. Obviously, a break of a lower high shows weakness in the trend, at least at that degree. So we have to consider that there's a potential that we could end up correcting to the larger degree impulsive range that is up here, that ends up here, and starts down at 65K. So breaking pivots can help us in Elliott Wave, let us know how strong the trend is and where we are in the count potentially. So because this is the last lower high before we topped out here at this higher high, and we ended up breaking that, then we can consider that this is the orthodox end of a wave 4 potentially. Now, because of the muddiness of this whole count and all these patterns in here, of course, this could mean that this is A, B, and then we're dealing with a C wave here before we get a move up as well. That is a possibility. If we do end up completing as a impulsive move down here, maybe this is the wave C of flat before we get move up to the upside. But that all corresponds and correlates with when we have a completed impulse, we're looking for a C3 to the upside no matter what. We're looking for a directional change, just at varying degrees. So in either case, if we do end up finishing in a nice, clean, impulsive move, which is what I prefer to have a bit of clarity to anchor off of to find a trade on, because it doesn't matter which way the trade goes or the direction goes. I just want to be with the market as it goes in that direction. So again, ideally, I'm looking for a potential for this to complete as an impulsive move to the downside. And then we're looking for a correction internal before we get the move down, and we'll be looking for trade entries at that point. So I do think that this completed a potential wave 4. If this is the wave 5, we're looking for further downside as the pattern has broken. Again, we don't have confirmation now. I think that since we have a completed break here, we're looking for that lower high and the break of the lower low before we get that official trend change. But over the weekend, what I'm looking for here is the completion of this impulsive move here. I think it's pretty blatant. We have a 1, 2, 3. I'm looking for that 4, 5, and then I'll be watching if we do end up bouncing out of this area for that impulsive move up and the break of the wave 4. So something to this effect here. You're looking for that break over here and then a correction in before a move up and a potential C3 setup for continuation for the C or for higher high if that was it. And that's the end of this being a potential A, B, C down before we get a move up. If we do get a swift move down here over the weekend or when futures turn on again, then that would help solidify that this is a bearish move to the downside. This is the wave 3, and then we have some kind of 1, 2 on the conservative side, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 5, and then we're moving down further down to the downside with the potential of taking out 65 and if not 60K. So that's the two things I'm watching for here. Nice completed impulsive move, a breakup, and then a correction for a C3 setup. Or if we end up breaking through all of this, I'll be looking for those offsets here to play. So if this is a 1, 2, I'll be looking for that 4 down here, potentially catch the 5, 4, 5 as we move further down. Now, typically, we take the stairs up, and we've been taking the stairs up over here, and we take the elevator down. We'll have to see how this plays out. I think the trade was up here. We can always justify our trades and say, I'm going to play this breakout for the wave 3. We're in a wave 3, definitely. We're going to move down through all of this. You could profit off of that, but it's a little bit more risky, in my opinion. I will not be doing that. But if we are in a wave 3, I do suspect that we will cut through all of this. When we actually do bounce, we're going to bounce, find some resistance here to reject from, and then move further down. So there's still a chance to enter here in the wave 3 if we end up moving nicely and technically. And if that happens, that's what I'm looking for on the other side of this AOI box. Now, a break of the AOI box doesn't necessarily mean game over. Again, it's all on how we react. So if we do end up breaking through this, we could just swift come back up like that. But there's not a lot of edge in that kind of setup unless you end up catching it, on some feels. You're still going to profit potentially, but there's no real edge there. So that's not really what I'm looking for here. Again, if we do slice through here, I'm looking for that correction to offset this correction up here, one of these corrections, look for a further move down. And before I look for a trade entry to the downside. And I think what is going to help us here is the correlations. I think there is a potential that we're going to end up breaking through all of this next week and we get some continuation to the downside. Let's dive into those. So here, doing the correlations, just doing an ocular pat down of where we are on these assets. I think the major pivot that I want to look at here, it happened on May 14th here at around 10 a.m. at around stocks open. We can see that at that point, ES started moving down up here, and then Bitcoin started moving down swiftly from there as well. If we look to the left there, we can see that Bitcoin was making lower highs while ES was making higher highs. So what that's telling me is that based off of ES, if ES is the top dog here, Bitcoin is definitely way weaker as far as correlations go, or essentially correlated to the bear side of things. So we're a lot more exaggerated to the downside when ES moves to the downside, and we're less likely to bounce as much when ES moves to the upside. And that plays out here as well, where we have a little bit of deviation when we got this swift move down yesterday, but we were bouncing with ES, and it just wasn't the same amount or the same percentage. So obviously, ES is the stronger asset, with BTC being the next strongest, but still pretty weak in comparison. Ether's just crap in the bed over here, and definitely the weakest. ES is definitely the stronger. So if you can figure out the clean count of what's going on in the stronger asset, you can use that onto the other assets that are correlated with it, either bullishly or bearishly, or whichever degree it is. Inversely, we can use our knowledge of where we think we are in the count to play these other assets. Because these other assets are weaker potentially at the moment, if we see weakness in the strong asset, we're going to come back over to our weaker assets and consider that they're going to move down in a higher percentage or exaggerate the move that's going to be coming in the lead asset. What that basically means is there's a potential ES is going to move down. So that means Bitcoin's going to move down. It's going to move down faster and harder. And same thing with ETH. Since it's the weakest, either it's so weak it's not going to continue moving down to the downside, or things are going to be exaggerated in the move in the bearish direction down. So that's how I typically look at correlations. If the top dog is moving one direction, I suspect the other assets that are correlated to it are going to move in a similar direction, but potentially not in the same percentage or the same oomph behind it, if you will. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive into ES. Here on ES, on the 1 hour, last week we were looking for a potential wave 4 to be coming in, and that so far is being held up. But we do have a potential for a corrective move down, a corrective move up. This definitely looks corrective, a 3-wave move. So there's a potential that we could be coming down next week, and that would bleed over into the down scenario in Bitcoin as well. We have hit the 90%. We have a high, so this is a good spot for people to do some top fishing as well. So there are some reasons that this level may hold. I don't know if we're in equal high territory yet, but at the moment, I believe we have a corrective move down and a corrective move up. And even if this is an impulsive move down and a corrective move up, guess which way the direction still is, to the downside. So I'm looking for the downside next week. We'll see how futures open. Again, anything can change, but I think our levels have come into play that we've been keeping an eye on, that being 74K here and 74.50 as well. Those are going to be the levels I'm watching. As you can see, we have some play. It's played as a flip zone, and up here as well, we've primarily had this as a resistance at 74.54. So if we can break above, or if we come back and retest it and continue on, I think that would be pretty huge. If we end up breaking these levels, I'm going to be watching for the underside to play as resistance, and we get further moves to the downside. Again, we hit the 90 percentile, so that could mean a couple things. That could mean that we're in flat territory, where we're going to get we have an A, B. The B is a little bit lazier and a less swift move, and then we're going to get a C wave down, which would equal out the length of the A, and we would get a break of this potentially, depending on if this is a running flat or not. We're not in that territory yet. We haven't broken this high. So if we ended up breaking this high and hitting the 1.5, then we could say there's a potential for a running flat, but right now we're just hitting the bare minimum for a flat. So when we look at flats, we're looking for a sweep of the A here, and we're looking for a 1-to-1 relationship off the A as well, which right now would put us at another kind of pivot of interest or level of interest at 73.50 here, 7,350. So this would be the area of interest if we end up coming down swift around open, let's say, do a swift move up and we end up bouncing back up above 74. I would consider that a flat complete, and then we're looking for a move up to sweep these all-time highs and continue up for another impulsive move up for completion up here. The other variant that's possible at this point would be a truncation, but again, all at the moment all things are pointing to down. There's more clues pointing to the downside than there is to the upside at the moment, but we'll have to see how we print when the futures open back up. So that's what I'm looking for on ES, and I think this adds up on ES because of what's happening on the dollar or the DXY, so let's look at that real quick. So here on the DXY, we've gotten a swift move up here. I think there's a potential that we're completing an impulsive move, and this would help ES and Bitcoin move in the opposite direction over the next week and potentially get a reversal and then have Bitcoin and ES move to the upside. That's my thesis at the moment. We don't have volume on DXY. We do have momentum. So I think we are losing momentum. We're going sideways. The Bollinger Bands are tightening up. So I think there's a potential that we're putting in a wave 4 or a wave 5. If we are tightening up in some kind of triangle, we are going to get a pop up in a post-triangle thrust potentially. Again, for triangles, we don't need that PTT or the post-triangle thrust. We could just extend in the 5th wave and keep heading up. But if we end up opening up on Monday or Sunday, let's say some news drops, we get the pop up, I think that would coincide with ES getting that swift move down before we end up moving back to the upside. So nice and short on DXY. I think this is a potential triangle or some sideways consolidation here. We're ranging sideways. We're going to get a pop up, and then we're going to get a reversal and a change in delivery from there as a potential correction internal, if not further down. We did end up filling this gap, I think, might be a tick or two off, but we ended up filling this, closing up some liquidity gaps. So I think this would be the most romantic kind of setup where DXY tops here, it brings everything else down for that quick second, and then we get a next move up to the upside. So next week is looking like it's going to be moving down for me. So this is what I'm seeing for now. As always, just rolling with the waves as they print. If you have a different take or something you see differently, leave a comment down below. I read them all. If you enjoy this kind of breakdown, please leave a like and subscribe. Check out one of these other videos. That's all I got for today. Take it easy. Trade safe, trade clarity. Later.